Hey there, Luna Shark members, True Sunlight listeners, and Cup of Justice listeners. Cups up, everybody.
Cups
Cups up.
up.
We have Mandy Matney with me, and we have our really, really good friend that we've been dying to interview, uh, world famous, excellent criminal defense attorney Noah Pines out of Atlanta, Georgia. Mandy, what do you think? Are we excited to do this or what?
I'm so excited, particularly because we get a lot of crap from people that say that we hate defense attorneys and defense attorneys hate us. And we don't. We love defense attorneys. They do an important job. And here's Noah. Noah, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This is a big deal, Mandy.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Tell us about your
Well,
family. Tell us
yeah.
about how long you've been a lawyer.
Well, like you, I grew up outside of Philadelphia. I came to Atlanta when I was 18 to go to college and basically stayed in the South ever since then. Really had no idea that I wanted to be a lawyer, even in college, didn't have an idea. And
What was
the,
your
the
major?
person I was, political science, easiest major at Emory. So, you didn't have to write a paper. It was pretty easy. I was like, oh, I'll just do that. And
Emory's not easy. Emory's not
Emory's
easy,
not
no.
easy, yeah. But someone suggested, the person I was dating at the time was like, we should go to law school. And I was like, that sounds like a good idea. We ended up breaking up and not going to law school together, which was a great thing because it led me to my wonderful wife, Jen. But, went to law school. And Mandy, like you, I am a huge introvert, which is weird because there are a lot of trial lawyers who are introverts. And so the thought of getting up and speaking in front of people and just speaking in general to people was really never something I thought I'd do. I thought I'd be the behind the scenes kind of guy. And just through some internships and experience led me to where I started practice. I interned in juvenile court. I worked with kids who were deprived, meaning they were neglected, or they were delinquent, meaning they were charged with acts that would be crimes if they were adults. Worked for a juvenile court judge who ended up on TV for a while, Judge Hatchett. And from there, I made it to a prosecutor's office to have an internship. And my intern supervisor, who's one of my good friends, he was a year older than me. Just one day we were doing something in court and he goes, yeah, you either got it or you don't. You got it and you should do this. And that's how I started my career. I said, okay. And that's how I started my career. I was a prosecutor in DeKalb County, which is the second largest county in the state of Georgia, for about 7.5 years total. Prosecuted misdemeanors for the first couple years and then ended up prosecuting felonies, mostly child abuse cases. And I left the office a little bit after my son was born to go into private practice criminal defense with my partner, Peter Ross, who started his career doing criminal defense and then kind of moved into the personal injury. So I came and took over the criminal part of the practice. He took over the personal injury part of the practice. And then about 15 years ago, we added an immigration part of our practice.
So you're like Ronnie and me. You have a partner that you've stayed together a long time, which is very, very rare. The rest of the world doesn't understand that, but two lawyers staying together as partners, for anything in excess of 5 years is pretty rare because lawyers have big egos. They disagree sometimes over money, over cases. You know, you made a statement that really interested me. You said that a lot of trial lawyers are introverts, actually. How
Um,
about, some people say
you
I
know,
won't represent a rapist or a thief
Right.
or, because you can't rehabilitate people like that.
well, let's start with my general principle. My general principle is if I start to judge my clients and make judgments on their actions, then it's time for me to quit what I'm doing. Like my job is not to make moral judgments on my clients. I can't. It's kind of like think about the ER doctor who sees somebody who's been shot all over. That ER doctor doesn't say, well, is this Eric Bland or is this, some gangbanger? And, do I really want to do the surgery the best I can? You just gotta, I can't make moral judgments. And when I do, that's when I need to quit. That doesn't mean I take every case. There are some cases I just don't like. I stay away from cartel drug cases. I don't like those. I stay away from anything that could, endanger my safety. And there are some people that I just don't want to represent. There are some, cases every once in a while where there was a case here in Atlanta where a teenager with mental health issues lured these two other teenagers behind a grocery store and killed them. And I was like, you know what? It's just too close to home. It literally was close to home. And the kids were my kids' age at the time, and I'm like, I'm just going to stay away from that. I stayed out of cases like the Young Thug case, if you know about that, the YSL case, which is a huge case in Atlanta. It's been going on since January. I stayed out of that case, not because of the content, but because I didn't want to spend a year in trial with the same lawyers. That would just drive me nuts. And, kind of to get back to the criminal part, criminal moves quicker, as you know, Eric. It is not, we're not dealing with motion after motion and deposition and then another motion and reply. It just moves quicker, and it's actually better for my brain. I realize this, as much as I sometimes would like to put the stress away, to be like, you know what, no more criminal. Like, I don't need the stress in my life. I'll just go deal with our civil practice because we have a ton of civil cases that need to be tried. I realize my brain's just not wired for that as much as it is for what I do. This is kind of where I thrive.
Noah was one of our first advertisers on MMP back in the day, a long time ago in 2021. Like, we just had a handful of advertisers, and I remember every advertiser. David's telling me to sit up. Okay, sorry. Whenever you do that. Okay. What did you, how did you get, how did you hear about MMP? What made you like it? What made you be a fan and then of Cup of Justice? How did you get interested in this?
Sure. So I can't remember if my wife Jen told me about MMP to begin with. Murdoch obviously bled into Georgia just because of the sensationalism of the story. But I was like, and my wife says this all the time. She's like, "You're such a cynic." I'm like, "I'm a cynic, but I'm right. Like 90% plus of the time, probably like you two." And I was like, something's not right about this case. And this is when it got first reported, that they got killed, and then the roadside. I'm like, something just doesn't sound right. And there was a big case in Dunwoody where it's the Dunwoody daycare murder case where a wife had her husband killed, and I remember my wife saying, "Oh, they love." I was like, "Nah, it's a love triangle." And she's like, "You don't know what you're talking about. Everybody knows them, says they were in love." And I'm like, "Love triangle." And of course, it was a love triangle. So Murdoch, definitely interested me in the story. And then I think Jen told me about the podcast, and I listened to it, and I was like, "Oh, this is really good." I listened to Undisclosed. I listened to a couple seasons of that, including Joey Watkins' case, which we can talk about later. And sometimes I hate to say it bored me, but it bored me because it was just sometimes too deep. And there was just something about MMP that kind of grabbed my attention. So I started listening in the beginning when everybody's making fun of your voice, Mandy, and so I'm a beginning listener. And by the way, what you have done, and I'm going to say you, because it is really you first with Liz and then Eric, is just incredibly amazing. And, by saying I'm proud of you, I don't want to sound patronizing. I've enjoyed watching what you've built, and it's really incredible. And I don't think people realize what it takes to build a podcast, especially to the level that you have with the amount of listeners you have. It's incredible. So hats off to you, or cups up to you, I guess is a better way to say, for what you've done. And so I became an early listener. I saw you needed some sponsors, and it was just one of those things where I was like, yeah, this is the right thing to do, because I enjoyed the show and I wanted to help out. And then I forget how long I sponsored at the beginning, and then I kind of tailed off on it. And I think by the time I tried to sponsor again, you guys were like too big. It was like you guys were really big. So then I sponsored Cup of Justice for a little bit. And I remember the early shows when Eric came on, and as soon as Eric came on, like, Eric, I don't sound like I'm from Philly anymore. You obviously do. And as soon as you started talking, there's like this familiarity that I'm like, oh man, I got to listen to this guy a little bit, and you sound like, the people I grew up with. And then of course, Cup of Justice, I think, is an interesting take on sort of, to be able to have these conversations without it really being, scripted isn't the right word, without it being as focused, a little bit more loose.
Yeah, I remember when Eric started on those first few episodes, getting so many messages and tweets from people saying, I like Eric. He has to be from Philly, right? Like people immediately knew you were from
Yeah.
Philly the first time you started talking. It was great. I want to get back to this. So tell us about Joey.
So Joey Watkins was a teenager up in a small town in North Georgia called Rome, Floyd County. And, you know, if you asked Joey what kind of kid he was, he would probably say he was a little bit of a rebel, and a little bit of an ass to a bunch of people. But, you know, that's just kind of he was a teenager. Rome is a small town, and everybody dated everybody. I mean, his trial, like everybody who testified had dated somebody else. But there's a gentleman by the name of Isaac Dawkins who was killed, and he was killed while driving his truck down a road, like a 4-lane divided highway, median in the middle with grass. And they didn't have any suspects. There was a car that was in the area, a blue car, and that's not what Joey drove, but people just started saying, Joey. And the reason is because Isaac dated Joey's ex-girlfriend. Joey had moved on from his ex-girlfriend, but, so Joey's name comes up. He's investigated by the local police. The local police have nothing on him, and they, in essence, closed the investigation. And then what happened was the family went to the county police. So the local police, meaning the city police, the county obviously has control of the entire county, and this detective, his name's Stanley Sutton, who ended up passing away recently. And I mean, you could do a whole year on Stanley Sutton and his cases, and what he's done, I think, to people. Stanley starts really confirmation bias against Joey, and just starts jamming these pieces together to make them fit, and they didn't fit. And Joey gets charged with murder, and Joey would tell you he wasn't worried because he didn't do it. He just really wasn't worried. Isaac is driving down a road, and he veers to he's driving, let's say, I can't remember if it's north, south, east, west. Anyway, he's driving in one direction. He veers across the median and then ends up in the woods on the other side of the highway. Okay. And he dies of gunshot. There's an eyewitness. That eyewitness says there's a blue car that was behind Isaac's truck. So the only car in the area is this blue car. And by the way, Joey didn't drive a blue car. He drove a pickup truck. And that's all they had. So they have Isaac dead in his truck. They have a really just kind of a horrible police investigation at the scene. Nobody really knew what they were doing. We don't have pictures of everything that we need. And that's what they had. And so Stanley Sutton, to kind of go back, starts, it's Joey. And this is, a long time ago when people had cell phones, but cell phone evidence was, sort of in its infancy. And the important part to know is that during the Joey's trial, testimony came out that, Joey was near his house when he made a call that pinged off a cell phone tower. That cell phone tower and the murder happened in another place. So, house here, murder here. The problem was that Joey's lawyers didn't really understand the cell phone evidence, nor did the state. And nobody talked about time distance. So time distance, it was 8.2 miles, roughly from where Joey was to where the murder happened. He would have had to, leave the area where his cell phone pinged, drove down a highway, done a U-turn because he had to get to the other side of the highway, killed Isaac, and he would have had to do that in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. So 8.2 miles in 4 minutes and 30 seconds.
Wow.
Impossible, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you'd
Right.
have, and by the way, there
Frustration.
was construction, there were cars, there was traffic. Nobody understood that, and nobody explained that to the jury. And Joey got convicted. I mean, he got convicted at trial. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that the DA's office did, including burying a ballistics report that really hurt Joey. The allegation was that Joey had killed 2 dogs, one of the dogs being Isaac's dog, and the other one was what they called the graveyard dog, which was a dog that was found near the grave of Isaac, which really wasn't near. It was found in a ditch on the side of the road. And the DA's office kept saying that Joey's the one who did it and this ballistics matched, and it turns out the ballistics didn't match.
Time out. How often does that happen? You just said they buried a report, and that just made Mandy and me just into orbit. I mean, does that happen a lot? Is it common? Do you see it? Is it accidental? Is it intentional?
Well, in this case, it appears intentional because it was delivered to the district attorney's office during the trial. And of course, everyone's like, well, we didn't know about it. I would say that deliberate burying happens a lot less than intentional shading. And intentional shading, although I think can be worse. I can give you a quick example. I handled an appeal of a guy who got convicted of rape in Savannah area. And when the GBI agent came and testified, she testified that there was DNA found in the rape kit and that it was likely and probable sperm. So likely and probable. To me, that means like there's a good chance. And the way that you determine if there was sperm in the DNA is actually pretty easy. You'll look under a microscope. They didn't look under a microscope. They used a procedure that wasn't approved. This is the GBI, so the Georgia Bureau of Investigations. Instead of looking under a microscope, which takes like 10 seconds, they used a procedure that was not approved. And when we had the GBI supervisor come testify at the motion for new trial, she admitted that they didn't look under my microscope.
What did it feel like when when you made that phone call and, was that the most gratifying feeling you've ever had in your career?
I think it was. It was like I had a feeling it was coming, and then I had to let the team know. And the team was just so involved too. I didn't want to give them false hope. I never give a client the news until it's signed and filed. Like, so we were all the lawyers were on the phone. I'm like, okay, it's going to happen. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, the case is going to get dismissed. Well, can we call Joey? I'm like, no. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, until I see a filed copy, because I can't ever give a client false hope. I mean, that's the worst thing you could do to somebody. You imagine being like, I think your case is going to get dismissed, Eric. Oh, I was wrong. Now you got a good trial for murder. Hey, Mandy, remember when you were going to go to prison for life? Now you're not. Oh, wait, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I thought it was going to happen. So unless it's done, I don't tell a client. And, while the lawyers were all on the phone, it came in. And so Claire Gilbert, who has been with the Innocence Project forever and really started this and was on the podcast a lot with Susan, I'm like, all right, let's get Joey on the phone, and Claire, you do it. And so Joey, and she just starts talking, and I was like, holy shit. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but I was like, Joey, your case is dismissed. I was like, it's like she was going on and on. I'm like, Joey, your case is dismissed. Like, let's just tell him. Then you can tell him whatever you want, but like give him the news. And he just really couldn't believe it.
What's he doing now? Is he trying to get his life back? How do you get your life back after 23 years?
So his family owned a used car business. He's been working there since he got out. He was such a great person, even when he was in custody, that for the last few years he was down in where the Georgia State Patrol services their cars, and Joey's knows how to work on cars. So he was like he got out of jail during the day to go work. He was kind of in work release, and so he actually worked. He worked on police cars. And they loved him. We actually had people come up and testify for his bond hearing who were law enforcement officers to say, this guy works on our cars every day. He's the greatest guy. We trust him. And so he's back in the car business. This is the first Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's that he spent out in 22 years. He went in at 20 and out at 42. And, I was actually messaging with Mandy one day, and we were just kind of joking around, and she mentioned Joey's case. I was like, you know what? Like, you're right, Mandy. I have to reach out to him and just see how he's doing. And I sent him pies for Thanksgiving so that he could, have a little something extra special. He went to. I called him up when the Braves were in the playoffs, and I was like, you ever been to a Braves playoff game? He's like, nope. I'm like, all right, well, come on down. You're coming tonight, and just to be able to get to experience life again. And he's not bitter. I don't know that I wouldn't be bitter, but he's grateful
I have one more legal question, and then we're going to get into your ultra marathon running and how long you've been Kojak for. But when you do ineffective assistance of counsel on a client, have you ever assisted in that? Like that always seems to me like the client's criticizing your representation, but you want it to happen so that they have a chance. Do you ever testify and say, yeah, I could have done this and I probably should have done this, or you don't cooperate in that ineffective assistance argument? That always is interesting to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, so, just for the listeners, ineffective assistance means your lawyer didn't do, a good job, which could be a constitutional violation. Anytime I have a client who gets convicted, of a serious offense, I say, go find another lawyer, get another lawyer for the appeal. That way they can allege ineffective if I've done anything wrong. If I've done something wrong, I'll 100% admit it. There are certain lawyers that won't admit it. I'm working on an appeal where one lawyer represented two people charged with murder. And one of them was accused of murdering their child, and the other one was accused of what's called second-degree murder for leaving the child in the care of the mother who was abusive, which is just impossible. It's not ethically possible to do that because the
Conflict.
defense for the one spouse is, I didn't know that she was abusing the kids. Like that would be
Right.
the defense. And that lawyer just refused to admit any. I mean, she was horrible in what she said. If I make a mistake, I'll admit it.
Well, to start out, I think something that has been very baffling to me, and I don't know about you, Noah, but watching people respond to all of this Becky stuff that's been going on and their accusations of jury tampering and the press acting like it was guaranteed that he was going to have a new trial and like it was an easy thing. Can you explain, like, and you just did, how difficult is it if you aren't a person like Alex Murdoch who has all the money and power in the world, how difficult is it to get a new trial after you're convicted of
Oh,
murder?
it's almost impossible. You're no longer presumed innocent. You're, presumed guilty. That the burden is there any evidence really to support the verdict? And, every time I find an error in a case, it's always like, well, yeah, you're right. There's error, but it's harmless error, which means it didn't impact the verdict. I'll come home after a day and I'll tell my wife, I'm like, man, I just lost an appeal. And she's like, yeah, no offense. You lose every appeal, which isn't true. I don't lose every appeal, but she
But
knows
it's
how hard
hard.
it is to, yeah,
Right.
I mean, you spend all this time working on appeals and you're like, you think you have a good issue. And the court's like, yep, it's harmless. Or, yeah, we're just not going to give you a new trial. And it happens all the time.
Right. And I was surprised even seeing headlines this week acting like Judge Toll has suddenly made this an uphill battle. Like it was he was sliding his way to a new trial. It's an uphill battle. That's the way that the system's designed. Once you are convicted by a jury of your peers, it's really, really hard to get a new trial. And I felt like I was in crazy land watching people just assume, okay, let's get ready for a new trial. And like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, I mean, and
go
the
ahead.
problem is people don't really understand the law and how the process works.
And how difficult it is. Like I
Yeah.
just kind of knew, I mean, I've listened to a lot of Undisclosed. I listened to Serial. I understood how hard it was for Adnan Syed to get released finally after years when there was lots of evidence in his favor. And again, we are talking about a man here where there is a lot of evidence that he is at the scene of the crime during the crime and nobody else is. It's just, it seems insane to me. But on that note, I would like to ask you about Dick and Jim and what you have thought of their defense throughout this case.
Well, I have a couple pieces of paper, which you can't read, but I went back through my DMs with you through Twitter, which by the way, I wasn't using Twitter back then, but I started using it because everybody was on it. I said to you, back up. I said this to you So, Mandy, I have some paper in front of me that I want to read to you, and it's our DMs back from December of 2022. And I guess you were getting a lot of hate, so I said, F the haters. You're doing a great job, except one thing. You and Eric keep saying how smart Dick and Jim are, but only morons make multiple factual statements about their cases, especially before seeing all the evidence. Nothing Alex said was vetted, and every criminal defense lawyer knows their client doesn't always tell the truth. They are just two dudes who wanted the fame of being on TV. I'll talk law all day, never facts. That's December 1, 2022. December 3, 2022, I just said, after listening to the last episode of MMP, I'm convinced Dick and Jim are morons who are just used to their power and bullying people to get what they want. They've got a reputation of being great lawyers, but no one has ever put that to the test. From the beginning,
And don't forget,
I couldn't
Noah,
believe.
don't forget that Jim went out on TV and said Alex had a clear-cut alibi. He was not at the murder
I
scene
know.
for a year.
It's crazy.
He did it on a
You
did it
never
on a
do that.
documentary. Right.
You never do that. Look, I handled a super high profile case in Atlanta of an Atlanta police officer who shot and killed somebody in self-defense, and every CNN and Fox and MSNBC, everybody wanted me to be on every night. And I didn't do any of them. I did one. The only media I did was I did a 45-minute court TV segment because I knew Vinny, who y'all know, and I knew that Vinny wouldn't do any gotcha stuff. He would actually let me talk. And it was a controlled environment. But there's no way I would have gotten on the news and started talking facts or anything about that, because until you have every fact and have reviewed every fact, you can't talk about the facts because your credibility is the most important thing. Dick and Jim had no credibility to me walking into that courtroom because of all the stuff that they said before that wasn't true.
Would you have put Alex on, yes or no? Yes or no?
Well, I mean, there's only two decisions client makes, right? I make every other decision. They decide guilty or not guilty, and they decide if they want to testify. I would have advised Alec not to testify. I think he would have done it anyway, but I would have done a cross of him myself, because clients say that all the time. Like, all right, I want to testify. And I'm like, and I just ask them like 10 questions in a row. And they're like, and I'm like, and that's a soft cross. And they're like, yeah, I get it now. Right? I get it. And he was ripe for cross-examination. I was actually thinking about that this morning, and I think Creighton did a good job. I think
not a great job.
I think he could have done more.
Yes.
I would have started off with, who do you trust most in your life? Or you're close with your dad, you're close with your brothers, you're close with Maggie. You love them. Are you closer with anyone else? And they're just kind of gone through all the people he lied to. You lied to your dad. You stole from your dad. You lied to your brother. You stole from your brother. You lied to your wife. You didn't steal from her. But I mean, it goes to, is there anyone you haven't lied to? Oh yeah, the jury. Right. I'm not lying to the jury now. Oh, okay. These 12 strangers you're going to tell the truth to, but you literally lied to everybody else in your life that you love. Including your dad.
Think? Yeah. Everyone. What do you think?
And that's why the financial part's so important.
Yeah. What do you think Dick and Jim's biggest mistake was throughout the last 2 years, whatever we're at, 2.5 years?
I don't feel like they thought of the global resolution to everything. Like, you've got to figure out, like, there's no way we're getting them out of the financial stuff. I just didn't see.
I think it's a totality. I think it's a totality.
I mean, you have to think of
not one single thing.
Right. It's global. I mean, I had a case. I tried a case up in Floyd County in Rome, and my client was charged with like 4 separate cases. And I'm like, I think we could win 3, but you're going to lose this 4th one. Like, I can't. It was just cut and dry. It was literally on paper. And I'm like, and this is what you're going to get, and you're going to get a non-parolable sentence, and we have to resolve all the cases. And he decided to take the case to trial, and he got I think a 30-year non-parolable conviction because he wasn't thinking about the global. It's like, wow, we can win this one, we can win this, But I'm like, but you can't do anything about this other one. And I just didn't feel like they had a global strategy for this case. And I think that they could have had a better global strategy for this case. Well, thank you for having me. It was a true honor. So I appreciate you inviting me into your home.
And with that, we say
Cups down.
cups down.
Cups down.
Great show, everybody.